Ahoy, mateys! And welcome back to Captain Keaton! Today I'm joined by none other than the amazing essayist himself, Mr. Daniel Santos. Welcome, Daniel.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always happy to be here in the captain's quarters.
Yes, welcome aboard, matey. It's great to have Daniel here today. Him and I go way back, and he is definitely a very, I don't know the right word to use. I probably should because I'm here with the essayist himself, but prolific maybe. He's a great content creator, cares a lot about his work, and it shows in his videos.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course. So let's just talk a little bit about what we do over here on Captain Keaton. I like to get perspective to give perspective. I feel like if I wasn't around for a game, especially, I want to know what it was like. And so that's sort of the mission here, is before I give any sort of input on what I think about some of these classics, I want to hear it from the source first. That's why Daniel's here today. He did grow up with A Link to the Past. So before I kind of inventory him on his opinions on the game, let's just talk about Daniel for a second. So what's going on with Daniel? What are you doing here in the creative spaces?
In the creative space, well, right now, I'm working on a video for Silent Hill 2. So Silent Hill is like my favorite horror franchise, period. Like, regardless of whether we're talking about video games. And I feel like Silent Hill 2 in particular is like one of those games that's been like over discussed. But despite that, I did like a recent playthrough, and despite the fact that I'm like super familiar with the game, replaying it again, I found something new to appreciate about it, which I didn't think would happen. So because of that, I was like, okay, I want to. For one thing, I don't want to get too deep into what the video is explicitly going to be about, but like there are some misconceptions about the game that I wanted to clear up, and I also wanted to focus on something that was surprisingly under discussed, which is a strange thing to say for a game that feels like people have picked it apart as far as like the online like analytical discourse is concerned. So. But there's like one really important like pivotal scene that like most people kind of like gloss over. So, yeah, that's what I've got. Like creatively speaking, that's like where my focus is right now. I'm currently like writing the script for that, and I'm like pretty excited about it. I feel like these are the types of videos I like making the most. Where while I do like making like I think my Scott Pilgrim video was very like personal. I also like videos like this where I'm just like kind of digging into an idea and just like fleshing it out and just talking about it from like different angles. That I think that's what I have like the most fun doing. So I'm really jazzed about this one.
Nice. Yeah, that's a passion project. I feel like you're a big Silent Hill fan. I feel like most of the times we talk, you bring it up. So I still have yet to play it. Someday I hope to. I just wish it was more accessible on the modern consoles. I'm not really a emulation type of guy, but one of these days, Daniel, one of these days.
Yeah, for sure. I do love the series. So like if I had brought it up before, I believe it. And I do agree. Like, yeah, it is way harder to get your hands on than it should be. There is like a kind of like janky PC version of 2 that got released a long time ago, but like the fans have taken it and they fixed it up, and that I would say is outside of playing like the original PS2 version, that's probably like your best bet otherwise, but that requires a bit of work to get working. So otherwise, like, yeah, if you want to experience the game, like bust out the PS2.
Awesome. Well, let's not get too into Silent Hill today. We're going to get into a different silent character, and that is Link, who comes to town. Do you think that song is by System of a Down?
It's been confirmed it's not System of a Down. Like, it's been hard confirmed. I forget the name of the band. I think it was Rabbit Foot or Rabbit Trick or something like that. That was the actual band, but like the guy just happened to sound kind of like Serge Tankian.
Would you rather believe it was?
I would rather believe it was because it does feel like something the band would do is kind of like a silly joke.
Mm. Well, we can believe what we want, I suppose. But we're going to talk about The Legend of
Yeah.
Zelda: A Link to the Past. So this does coincide with your first Zelda memory, which is what I want to ask you about today. Before we get too much into what it was like, I just want to know, what is the first thing Zelda that you remember? Do you have like a poignant memory that stands out to you?
I do. So, and this is a story from for both me and my dad. So, the earliest memory I have is my dad was like playing the game, and he got frustrated with some part of the game. And this was around the time where I was like 3 years old, so I was like really tiny. And he was playing the game, and he got frustrated with some part of it, and he was just like, "Ugh, I'm just gonna walk away." Only for him to come back into the room, and I was there playing the game with the controller upside down. And I do remember at that age, for whatever reason, I played every game with the controller upside down. I don't know what was wrong with me, and don't ask me to do it now. I can't do it anymore. But yeah, I do remember doing that, and my dad was like, "He's playing it with the controller upside down, and he's doing a good job." So yeah, that is like my earliest memory.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you were like single digits when you played it. So, was this your first video game?
I want to say that it was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it was. The only other games that I have like early memories of playing are Breath of Fire and Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. It was those three were like the earliest games that I played for sure. And I guess probably Super Mario World, but like those other three like stick out of my memory more as like being the firsts.
Do you remember how the Super Nintendo kind of came about in your household?
No, I don't. Because again, I was like 3 years old at the time, so super young. Um, I do know that my both of my parents had an NES before the SNES, and they loved Castlevania and Ninja Gaiden, and uh, my mom and dad beat them both. Like they were actually like pretty hardcore gamers at the time, which is kind of strange. Like nowadays, my mom like the only game she plays nowadays is Candy Crush. But my dad still plays video games, although he mostly plays like games like Dragon Age. Like Dragon Age is like his favorite thing. He likes Dragon Age. He likes Diablo. He's been playing the recent Final Fantasy 16. He's been enjoying that. But that's like the type of game that he plays nowadays.
Wow, that's so cool. You have a family of gamers, hardcore gamers at that, and Candy
Yeah,
Crushers.
my my younger sister also plays video games. My older one, not really, but like my younger sister, Silent Hill is also one of her favorites. She really likes Persona. She really likes horror and JRPGs. That's like her vibe.
Wow, amazing. Let's talk about your experience with Zelda. So you had quite a catalog of Super Nintendo games to kind of compare it to. Um, Obviously, the JRPGs kind of have a significant impact on you as well. Where does Link to the
Yes.
Past fall in, I guess, that equation?
I would say I would say that Zelda, even though Zelda I wouldn't personally say is a JRPG, um, I would say that Zelda did help foster my love for JRPGs because the fantasy genre is so like closely associated with JRPGs. So me loving A Link to the Past so much, and then seeing other games like Breath of Fire, like the Final Fantasy games, um, like there is that overlap. So I do feel like if I don't know if I could go as it's hard to say, but like if I didn't play A Link to the Past, would I be into JRPGs? It's kind of hard to say, but it's undeniable that it played a part. And it probably also played a part in me liking action games as well. Like I really love games like Ninja Gaiden and Devil May Cry, games that have like more involved like action mechanics. And I think it started with Zelda as well, because even though obviously Zelda's combat is very simplistic, I think it just instilled in me that like that love of just like that simple desire of just like hitting things with a sword, you know?
Yeah, there's something smooth about this game. Uh, Even just going back today, it really
Absolutely.
plays like tight, really tight
It
controls.
does. It absolutely does. It's I've played through the game like multiple times over the years, and there's never been a time where where I go back to it and I'm just like, oh man, it feels so old. It's like no, it feels just as good now as it did like back in the day, I would say.
Let's talk about back in the day. You mentioned that you loved it back then. What did you love about Link to the Past back then?
So I think a big part of it for me was like the sense of adventure. I really like the idea of like I because like a lot of JRPGs you travel with like a party. And I love that too. I love having like a group of buddies just going around on a journey together. But I also really liked about like Zelda that it's all on you. It's your Link. It's all on your shoulders. You're going on this quest by yourself, and it's up to you to like save Hyrule. And I really like that idea of like the lone warrior going about like taking care of everything by himself. And I think because of that, um, it's not so much nowadays, but like over the like especially when I was younger, whenever I played other like JRPGs, I always wanted the main character to be the strongest because I would like associate myself with the main character the most. So I was like, they gotta be doing the most damage, you know? But yeah, I think that was it. It was just like I really liked that going on an adventure, exploring Hyrule, figuring out everything by myself, and that kind of like I don't want to say solemn or anything like that. It's not like sad or anything, but it is like a quest of solitude in a sense because like it's all on you and you don't have anyone really to help you. Like you might have like an NPC or something that like gives you something that you need, but like even then, I would say like that still requires like the player's like sense of ingenuity and just like paying attention in order to like figure out okay, this is the person you need to talk to. So even though they're helping you, it still requires like you to be thinking about what you're doing in order to like achieve your goals in the game.
You definitely have to be aware of many things, and definitely in terms of the adventure, like, where you're going on the map. And I mean, they do spell it out sometimes, but even then, it's like getting there, it's using items for progression, it's following cues, like even going in Kakariko Town, there's like one villager will tell you where the mystic sage Sahasrara is, and then it's kind of up to you to find
Yeah,
them. So, it is a cognitive process. I think that is kind of a valuable thing about Zelda. I want to know
for sure.
from back in the day, were there any other memories that stood out to you besides the controller bit? Or even
Sure.
scenes,
Sure. So I also vividly remember just the the fact that like your I think he's your uncle, right? Um the fact that he like goes out on his own and he's got like the sword and shield, and then you have to figure out like where he is, and you go into the castle's sewers and he's just there. There's really no explanation as to what happened to him, but he's just like beat up and he's just like I can't do this. You gotta do it on your own, and gives you the sword and shield and teaches you how to do the spin attack. For whatever reason, as like a kid, that was like really stood out to me of like I think this again this kind of ties back to like this you're doing this all on your own. Um because it's like yeah, like your uncle was like the only person in the game. It kind of felt especially at that point because it's like it's raining, it's kind of like dark and gloomy, and Zelda's like communicating telepathically or whatever. She's like, Link, come get me. So she's like in a state of need, and you just started the game, and it's like you're just kind of thrown in there, even though you're super like guided into what you're supposed to do. But as a little kid, it really feels like, oh man, I'm just kind of thrown into this and I gotta figure this out. But like having what is like your only aid in the game just like so immediately gone really like hammered in this idea of like, yeah, I got to do this and I got to do this by myself. But I also really like that at the very end of the game when you finish it, I guess spoilers for like the one of the last things that you see in the game is your uncle's actually fine. He's like he's there. He's like you do the little spin attack with him at the end and you're both posing and it's like, "Oh, no, he's okay. It's fine." Like that's also like a memory that stuck out to me of like I remember being really happy when I beat the game and I saw the credits and I saw that the uncle was back and I was like, oh, he's still alive. It's all good.
There's something symbolic about the fact that your dad dropped the game and then kind of left you to play through it, and then your uncle in the game kind of drops down and collapses. So it's interesting.
I never made that connection, but you're not wrong, right? Like that is true. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's something like metaphoric about it. It's like or Freudian or like psychological, right? Like it's like the young male's growth into like an adulthood or something, or like adventure, like on his own. I kind of always enjoyed that too. Like, I mean, Ocarina of Time was my first one, and individual games aside, I do think that within this series, they really do push forward that idea of like, can you withstand the adventure? I know that the original game was based a lot in communication, but it really is a journey of solitude. So I like that.
No, I agree with that. And I think it also adheres a lot to like, I forget the guy's name, but he came up with like the hero's journey, the hero with 1,000 faces. And I feel like the Zelda games in general really strongly adhere to that, where like you have the call to adventure. You have like the mentor that like either dies or something happens, and then like you have a reason to go on the adventure. Most of the Zelda games, whether intentionally or not, really adhere to like the hero's journey structure. Interestingly, so does Devil May Cry 3. And although I think it was actually like really intentional in that game, but that's neither here nor there.
How far did you get when you were playing this for the first time?
That's hard to say. I know that I beat the game multiple times as a kid, but like when I was like 3, like the very first time I played through the game, I don't think I finished it. I'm pretty sure I actually finished it when I came back to the game later, when I was like in 5th grade or something, like 5th or 4th grade, something like that. But no, it's hard for me to say. I want to say that I at least got to maybe the Dark World, but even then, I'm not 100% sure. Like, just full disclosure, I was born in '89, so we're talking about like 3 decades worth of memories. So
sure. And from like would you have your first memories? Like my first memory is like 2 years old, and I can think like 1. So I get that.
Yeah. No, yeah, like when we're talking about like going back like that far, like I remember the old apartment that I used to live in with my parents, and I remember the layout, and but like aside from that, like that was about it.
So you finished this like around 5th grade. What was your first playthrough like?
So you mean that playthrough when I actually like finished the game?
Sure. Yeah, like I guess your first time clearing it.
Yeah. Okay. So I remember because I always had like really strong connection to the game. But I think around that time, the PS1 came out, the N64 came out. So I was playing like other games, and then I think I just had this like feeling of like, You know, I should go back and finish A Link to the Past because um, there's just something about that game. There's just something so charming about it. There's something so like likable about that game that just kind of drew me back to it. And actually, like going through it, finishing the game, um, like it really made me realize like how much like it meant to me, and it also like said a lot about like how it kind of shaped my taste in games because I think I may have already played Ocarina of Time as well. Um, so I can't remember if I beat Ocarina first or a Link. I think I beat A Link to the Past first, and then now I think about it, I'm pretty sure I beat A Link to the Past first, and then I beat Ocarina of Time. So it was interesting, kind of like comparing, contrasting. And I was one of those like kind of obnoxious kids that was like, A Link to the Past is better than Ocarina of Time. You know, Ocarina of Time is cool, but A Link to the Past is where it's at. But I would say I would still say I personally prefer A Link to the Past over Ocarina, but I still really like Ocarina. Ocarina is a classic. Like Ocarina is still like one of the best games ever made. Like just the importance of that game. But I do think it is really interesting to see like A Link to the Past and how like had like such a strong influence on how Ocarina of Time shaped up. But yeah, going back to that original playthrough, I think that was around the time where I was also like going back and like reliving other Super Nintendo games that I played because at the time I remember our house got robbed, and this was um like a couple of years before this playthrough. So I I think most of my games got stolen except for like a handful. And one of them was A Link to the Past. So it was I think that was another reason why I played it so much around that time was because like it was one of the only games that I had until we got a PS1 and then 64 and started building that collection. But yeah, it was it was a meaningful experience for me just because like there wasn't really much that I could play. Like I remember having like a beat 'em up of The Tick, and that game kind of sucks. And then I had like this like college football game for the SNES as well, and that game I'm not really big on sports personally, so like that game held no appeal to me. So yeah, that when it's like the only good game that you have, like quite literally, because all your the rest, because like, I remember had like a pretty sizable SNES collection. I remember Breath of Fire was stolen, Mystic Quest was stolen. I had a bunch of other games. Super Metroid got stolen. So yeah, it yeah, like I said, when it's like the only good game that you have, you're gonna play it a lot. Um, so yeah, yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's meaningful, man. I mean, I can't like I don't even know if I necessarily have a follow up to it. It's just that I think that like I appreciate you sharing that story. You know, I think we definitely appreciate things when like I almost think less is more. So
Yes.
like when you back in the day, I mean, games are so abundant now. It's not to say you can't appreciate
Yes.
games the same way. You can. It's just it takes a kind of an understanding of like the way it works. I think if you're a kid nowadays, like your access to games is still probably limited. So, it's just it. Will they appreciate a Zelda game the same way? I don't know. Maybe not, but I think there are examples of that, like for kids nowadays. It's just that our experiences are so different. We were limited to what we had access to, and even the
Yes.
circumstances of our environment. And I'm sorry that you went through that, but it does sound like something
No, it's
good
okay.
came out of it too.
No, absolutely. And I definitely get what you're saying with like there's such an abundance of video games. Like sometimes where I'll have my Steam list of games open and I have like a bunch of games that I've been meaning to get to, and it's what's it called? Option paralysis or something like that. Choice paralysis.
Analysis paralysis.
Yeah, yeah. Where it's like I will like overthink what I want to play. It's like, oh, I should play this because I dropped it and I should go back to it. Oh, but like I wanted to start this game because so and so said it was really good, or oh, this just came out, so I should play this because it's brand new and everyone's talking about it and all that. But like back when I was a kid, and same for you, of course, we didn't have that. It was literally just like you had what you had and you played what you had and that was it, right? So it it helped us appreciate. I think it helped us appreciate what we had a lot more. And now that I'm like, because I haven't really thought about these memories in a really long time, so I kind of like. I'm like, I feel like I'm dredging up like all these old like memories of like, oh wait, yeah, I got robbed around that time. So like this happened, and like it's like, oh wait, did I actually, was my first completion of the game in 5th grade? Like it may have been sooner than that. I don't quite remember anymore because it's been so long. But like, yeah, now that I'm starting to think about it, it probably was a little earlier than that because I think when I got robbed, that was like 2nd or 3rd grade. But since I still had Zelda. Oh, actually, a kind of a messed up thing too was around that time when I got robbed. I think they stole my controllers too. So I think I had to like beg my uncle to give me a controller, and then when he did, the controller didn't even friggin' work. So yeah, that was brutal. I remember it took some time before I finally got like a proper controller to play the game. I remember I also begged to get like Super Metroid back because like I really liked Super Metroid. And then I know this is kind of a non sequitur, but like I had this vivid memory where because I begged to get Super Metroid because I really wanted to play Super Metroid again. And then I got stuck at some point because there's kind of like a noob trap of sorts in Super Metroid. I don't know if you ever played that game.
Yes.
Okay, so you might know where I'm talking about, where like there is like kind of like a trap of sorts where you fall down these there's this hallway, and then you like it kind of baits you with an energy tank, and then but like right there is like these disappearing blocks, and then you fall through, and then the game basically forces you to learn how to do the wall jump.
Mm-hmm.
And this is back before the internet. And you would think a wall jump would work like any other game with a wall jump where you press like the opposite direction and the jump button at the same time. And that's not how it works. And I couldn't figure it out. And I had no idea how it worked. And I was just stuck there. And I remember like feeling really, really bad because like apparently the game was like pretty pricey. And my dad was like kind of pissed that like he spent that much money on the game, and it just I just have this memory like, oh, I can't even beat the game after I badgered them to buy it for me.
Do you think he was pissed at you or the game?
He wasn't like I think money was just tight at the time and he just wanted to make me happy. So I think he was just like upset that like he lost out on the money, but like it wasn't anything more than that. But yeah, we kind of like got off of Zelda there, but like
that's okay. It's fun to take the trip down memory lane.
For sure. Super Metroid's a great game though.
My parents bought me a guitar once, and I played it for like a month. So like I know what that's like.
Yeah. Same thing happened to me. I had an electric guitar, and I was not disciplined enough to actually like learn anything. I knew how to do like the riff from Toxicity, and that was like the only thing I knew how to do.
Hey, our parents, they tried, man,
For sure.
Yeah, so I appreciate them. Let's go a little more modern. So you said you have played the game through in recent years, and since that time, what has your relationship been like with Link to the Past since then.
Okay. So I feel like whenever I return to the game, uh, obviously there's no way that it's going to make me feel exactly how it did when I first played it as a little kid, because that's just not how that works. But the game is such a strong game in vision and like mechanically and the tightness of the level design, that like regardless of, because I'll still have nostalgia playing it again, of course, but like I feel like even if I wasn't nostalgic for the game, it's just such a good, fun, likable game that like I always have a good time whenever I go back to it. It's um they when they put it on the Switch, for example, I don't think I completed that playthrough because there's always so many like games coming out that kind of draw my attention away from it. But like I remember getting pretty decently far even in that playthrough and just having a really good time with it. Like it's just a fun game. And whenever I do go back to it though, I do have that like nostalgia at the same time where I'm like playing through it like reminds me of like not just it doesn't just remind me of like things that I did in the game itself. It reminds me of the period of my life when I was playing it. So like it'll playing it will remind me of like my best friend Jonathan when I was growing up because we played it together, because he was like my best friend at the time, and we literally we went to elementary school together, and it was really fun because we were great friends at school. And then when Halloween came around, he trick or treated to my house, and he was like, "It's you!" And it turns out we lived in the same neighborhood, and more than just the same neighborhood. We shared the same backyard fence.
Wow.
And there were like multiple weekends where like my dad would pick me up and his older brother would then grab me and then like so I could like go over and hang out instead of like walking around the neighborhood. But yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Did you play Zelda with him?
Yeah, we played it together, even though obviously it's a single player game. But like I think he was. I think I let him borrow it, and he needed help, so like we would play it together, and I would like try to like tell him what to do, and it's like, oh, you got to go here, you got to get this item over there, and there's a piece of heart in the tree there, stuff like that.
More people than not that I've interviewed have actually played this game in sort of a communal way where they like got like they were kind of guided through the game, or like not necessarily they may have been the expert of the group, but they played it like with other people. So I was like really interested to, I don't know, kind of hear that.
Yeah, I was definitely the expert in this scenario. Because it's really interesting because I hear a lot of people who have these stories that like of older brothers that they have, or like an older sibling where they're like, oh, I know all this stuff because my sibling was the one that introduced it to me. Or if it's not a sibling, it's like a cousin or something like that. And I never really had that. Really, like I did have my uncles. I have one uncle in particular who was more of a gamer than the other one. But he was the one that he would show me stuff like, because he was really into shooters. So he would buy stuff like Resident Evil. He bought stuff like Silent Hill. That's where I became such a big Silent Hill fan. He was not into like fantasy stuff. He was not into like those types of like action games or anything like that. So like when it came to like getting into JRPGs and the fantasy genre and stuff like that, I was mostly on my own. Like my dad did kind of facilitate it. He was like, he would be like, oh yeah, this looks cool. You should, I'll get it for you if you want. But like, it wasn't like he was like guiding me through. Like, it wasn't like he was like, son, you need to play Zelda. It wasn't like that. It's not like how it usually is with like I guess, siblings and cousins where they're like, dude, I gotta show you this. I didn't have anyone like that. I really felt like I was on my own, just kind of figuring out my tastes in a way. And Zelda, A Link to the Past, I think, again, going back to it, I don't know if my taste would be the same if I didn't play that game in particular. I really feel like looking back on it, that created like the foundation for like a lot of the stuff that I like nowadays.
Hmm. So let's talk about the highlights then. What are some of the most memorable parts or the things that you think make Link to the Past shine so great even today, even without the nostalgia?
Okay, so I think that the level design I think is still really good. I think the level design has this great like upward. Sorry, like I think it has this great upward trajectory. Like it's very steady incline where it like slowly grows in complexity as you play through the game. Um, and I think one of the things that again like something that I really appreciated it, and again kind of like the overlap with the JRPG genre is you really get a sense that like you're getting stronger throughout the game. You're increasing your hearts. You're getting more equipment. It starts off with like the lamp, and then you get the boomerang, you get the hook shot, you get the fire rod, the ice rod. You're getting more stuff as you play through the game. It adds to that sense of progression, and it does really make you feel like what you're doing matters in the game. Nowadays it might seem a little primitive, but like I still feel like it does a really good job of adding to that sense of progression. Um, and I feel like the world of Hyrule just feels so alive. I think the sprite work, the pixel art, all holds up beautifully. Whenever I go back to the game, I'm like, this game still looks great. Even though the game was obviously made for like CRT TVs in mind. And I do remember like some like the way that some pixels look were meant to be blended with the scan lines a certain way so that it would like create more of like a roundedness to it that's not really apparent if you play like an emulated version of it like even on the Switch. But like even looking at like the raw like square pixels, like I still think the game looks great. And I think that the charmingness of the art style, the fantastic music, like I think all of it still holds up really well. And I think a really memorable, like going out to like very specific like memorable moments in the game. I think one of the most pivotal is when you go to the dark world. To me, like it was always really cool. Like as a kid, seeing the light world and then seeing this like dark world version of it where everything is like twisted. Everything is like kind of messed up. Within reason. It's still a kid's game, obviously. I always thought that was like, whoa, this is really cool. It's like the same place but different. And even playing it again as an adult, I still feel like the impact of the Dark World still holds because it recontextualizes how you see the world, right? Like you feel like for like that first like third of the game, you have a really good sense of what Hyrule is like. And then when you go to the Dark World, it's the same but different, and it forces you to engage with it in a completely different way. Like areas you thought that you could go to easily, now you need that like there's like that bridge. You can't go to the bridge anymore. You need the hammer to like make your way through it. So I think just from the impact, like more viscerally of like the Dark World is it has a completely different vibe to it, but also just mechanically has some light sort of Metroidvania element to it of yeah, you need a special piece of gear first if you want to get to certain locations. And I think again, it just makes the world feel more alive and believable in a sense because like yeah, of course if you go to like a messed up version of of Hyrule, that it's going to have extra obstacles. It's going to have like more stuff that you have to deal with. It's going to be harder. It's going to have like different types of enemies that take more hits. It's going to have like different things in your way that's going to require different tools that you don't have yet. That again, tying back to that sense of progression, right? That I was talking about earlier. It feeds into that. So like again, the more you play the game and the more stuff that you get, it makes you feel like everything that you're doing is like it's for a reason, and it's all like furthering your goals in the game. So I feel like again, like the game is, even if I didn't have nostalgia for the game, I just think the game, looking back on it, is still like super well designed. It looks great, sounds great. It's still it's again, maybe someone will be like, nah, you're just blinded by nostalgia, but I maybe partly, but like I don't know. I still think like in my 30s now. I played the game pretty recently. I still had a really good time with it. Like I don't think the nostalgia goggles are like glued that hard to my eye sockets that like I'm like tricking myself into like enjoying this game, Like it's still a fun game.
Yeah, I mean, well, if we take like nostalgia, like from Merriam-Webster or whatever dictionary, it's going to tell you, oh, it's a longing to recreate your childhood. It doesn't sound like that's what you're trying to do. I mean, maybe there's elements of feeling some of your childhood, but you go in with like the fresh perspective every time, and this game is impactful. It has strong level design, even compared to future entries, which we can kind of get into in a little bit. And then even conceptually,
sure.
this idea of the dark world, I do have to like not extend grace per se, but this is the first Zelda of this style. Like, granted, you could say the first one, okay, there's elements of it, but there's not using Metroidvania style exploration. What narrative is there? You're talking to old men in caves who, give you little secrets. This is a completely different scope. And so, in playing the NES ones up to this one, that's when I really found my appreciation for, wow, they did this in 1991 in the year of the launch of the SNES. And look at how well it's held up, and even within the scope of the series. So it really is impressive on so many fronts. That dark world thing, I think you really have to use your imagination as well. Like, I think that will give you more fruit to like kind of take out of it. Like, you start in this main world and then it's kind of turns everything on its head, your classic, I guess, Symphony of the Night style moment. But, I think like when you think of like, what are these things that I'm seeing? They're not people. They're little freaking elves or something, like in stores selling you things, and all of a sudden those brainwashed knights are now moblins. Dude, like what am I living in? And then your town, when you go back to Kakariko and it's a graveyard and there's freaking ghosts flying around. Dude, so many great like concepts that I think are really well explored. And of course your flute boy, man, chef's kiss.
No, I'm glad you brought up like the narrative too, because like I didn't play Zelda 1 and 2 obviously when I played A Link to the Past. I just went straight into A Link to the Past. So like I think that was that had to have been like the very first game I ever played where like, I mean, it was probably my first game period, but like the fact that it had a story, and I think that also played a part in me like caring so much about stories in games. Because dude, the first games that I ever played put that emphasis on the story, right? Like, granted, you go back to Link to the Past now, it's like it's not like a super deep narrative or anything, but compared to like the first two games, it definitely has a lot more going on, right? Like even with the simple cutscene at the beginning where Zelda's like trying to communicate telepathically, she's like, "Yo, Link, I need your help. You got to help me," like. It immediately creates like a little like bond. You're like, oh, someone needs me. I'm the hero, right? I got to do it. And it's not much, but it is something, especially for a little kid. Like it's simple, but it's effective. And that's all it really needed to be. And I also, you brought up like the brainwashed knights. Like as a kid, I always loved fighting them because to me it felt like, oh, I'm dueling, like I always loved the idea of like swordsmen like fighting each other. Like to me as a kid, it always felt so cool. So like fighting the knights in particular, it really felt like um that like have you ever seen the movie Princess Bride?
No.
Strongly recommend it. Excellent, excellent movie. Very funny, very charming. But like there is like multiple like fight scenes in the movie. But there's like one in particular between like the main character and another guy who could also have been like he could have been like the main character of another movie. And they both have this like amazing sword fight. And that sword fight has kind of like lived rent free in my head ever since I saw the movie. And I feel like whenever I play a game, if I can use a sword, I want to use a sword so that I can recreate that fight for me. But like, no, yeah, I definitely agree that like the story of this game definitely helps a lot because it adds kind of like an incentive for you. Like even if Zelda herself isn't like much of a character, like her name is on the box, right? Like she needs your help. You feel that urge to like fulfill your duties as like the hero of Hyrule to save her and to do what you can to help her. And I don't know if that was really so much the case in the first one. Like yeah, you are like you are technically like still saving her in the first Zelda, but like that kind of feels like incidental, kind of like with Princess Peach in like the first Mario Brothers. It's like, oh, our princess is in another castle. Just keep going. Eventually, you'll get her. Okay, I guess. I think with A Link to the Past, they add just a little bit more to it, so you feel like more. You have like just that slight bit more of like a connection to her that makes you want to like help her and save her.
Sure, and to kind of maybe I don't know what the NES heads will say, but I mean, does it have a story? Yes, it's just in the manual and like the intro screen. I understand, it's the product of its time with the limitations of the hardware, but I think the key phrase there is in game. I think that the addition of storytelling as a medium within the game, or like the ability to expand on that with the 16-bit hardware, did miles for the genre and for games as a whole. So, and some games have taken it too far. I mean, I'm gonna replay Skyward Sword at some point, and we'll see how that does for me for story. But I remember liking it back in the day. But I think that this is like that perfect balance. It leaves enough for you to think about for your imagination, but also without, it does kind of give you some snippets, some taste. You get to walk around with Zelda for a bit, until you get the Master Sword, and she's there for you to talk to. So she, you do have some real connection in that sense. So I appreciate that.
Agreed. I also remember like if you leave the title screen running, eventually it will give you like a lore dump of sorts. It will give you like some exposition on like the backstory, and I haven't like looked it up in a while, so I don't remember exactly what is said in that. But like I remember thinking as a kid, like the pixel art was really cool, and I didn't really understand what was being said because like it's going into like the backstory of Hyrule and stuff like that. So like I'm like 3 years old, so obviously I don't really get it. But like I just remember looking at it and thinking, oh, this looks really cool. Like this, even if I didn't like fully understand it, it still gave the world like this air of believability because like even I could still like vaguely understand like, oh, this is like talking about like the history. And I don't think like Zelda 1 or 2 really got into like backstory or lore or anything like that. And even if it's not like super complex in A Link to the Past, just the impression of a sense of history, I think again adds a lot to like the believability of Hyrule. And that's something else I really like about Link to the Past is Hyrule feels like a place. Like in Zelda 1, and I don't mean the dog on Zelda 1. Zelda 1's a great game for what it was and it's super important. But like Zelda 1, Hyrule just feels like a big maze that you're like running around and you do stuff in. as opposed to Hyrule in A Link to the Past, where there's towns, there's people that you can talk to in those towns, and they have their own lives going on. Like it really feels like it has more of a sense of place. Like it feels like a lived-in location compared to the other games. Although Zelda 2 did try to do that as well, to be fair.
Yeah, I'd give some credit to Zelda 2 for that, and probably having more towns than in this one. But, man, do any of them compare to Kakariko Village?
No, definitely not. That's what I'm saying. Like, Kakariko Village feels like a real village. Like, in Zelda 2's defense, it was a side scroller, so I guess it is a bit harder to, like, convey that sense of location. But, like, A Link to the Past really made you feel like Kakariko Village was like this quaint little place where like the people there are just trying to get by. They're just trying to live their lives, doing what they do, and and it also had its own little secrets and stuff. Like you can go into a house, you can find like an empty bottle. You can find like pieces of heart. Like so even in a location like that could have been like just for set dressing, they still make sure that it's important. They make sure that's like it's part of your journey as like the hero of Hyrule to, and I think that's good because like I feel like if it was entirely just like just a place to go to, like even if it was charming, it wouldn't have had like as much of an impact. But like the fact that you have to go there and that there's like stuff that helps you there, it helps create like more of like a connection. Kind of like might sound like a weird pull, but kind of like Shadow of the Colossus in that sense, where like I feel like part of why players really appreciated Aggro the horse is because Aggro has so much utility gameplay wise. So when things happen toward the end of the game and you no longer have Aggro to help you anymore, you feel the loss so strongly because Aggro has been with you through the whole game, not just as your companion, but mechanically. So I think just like there's something to be said about the interactivity of games in that sense, where like it does a lot to facilitate the connection that you have with something in a game just by adding some like simple mechanical like connections so that the player feels like they're adding that usefulness also makes you kind of like, oh, you appreciate them.
So just to clarify, are you saying that like the village is your aggro?
In a sense, because like, obviously not to the same extent because like aggro is with you for the entire game. Like aggro's usefulness far outstrips, Kakariko in that sense. But I feel like if Kakariko, because like a lot of JRPG towns, you can kind of like take them or leave them. Like there are a lot of towns that kind of just exist just for the sake of like, well, you need an inn, you need to like get some gear and stuff, right? And that's it. But like I feel like Kakariko Village, it's a little bit more to it than that, right? Like you get like upgrades there. You're always going back there. Like there's most JRPG towns, for example, you go there once, maybe twice, you're done. Like how many times do you really need to go back to the Village of Calm in Final Fantasy VII? Not really. There's tons of JRPG towns that kind of like you go there, you sleep at the inn, you get your gear, you're done. Kakariko Village, you're always going back there for something. And I think that's a big reason why that village in particular has persisted throughout the entirety of the Zelda franchise. I think they acknowledge that this is a town that like this is a village that people connect with on some level. So always keep bringing him back, and it's always useful to some extent beyond just, well, Link needs a place to buy potions, right? Like there's always some usefulness beyond that, and I think that adds to people's connection to Kakariko Village over the years.
And you do also kind of lose Kakariko in a sense, whichever iteration you're playing. But in this one, the first time you come on it in the Dark World and you see it's a graveyard, or
Yeah,
Ocarina, and it's the Song of Storms or the well, it's evaporating. There's that big tornado there. It's like it's a big
yeah.
dark moment, and that is kind of like I don't know. It does feel homey, like kind of a village, like that you can kind of go back to, and it's something's always a little tense there. You got villagers kind of on the fritz, calling the police soldiers on you, but
Yeah.
it's always a good time in Kakariko Village. That music too, man, that hits home.
Uh yeah. Yeah, the music in the Zelda series has always been great, but like A Link to the Past music, again, it probably is nostalgia to a certain extent, but like it always sticks to my mind. Like Kakariko's theme is so cozy, it's so comfy, right? Like I could just picture like just covering yourself up with a warm blanket, drinking some hot chocolate to that theme,
That's a feel good 10-hour YouTube video.
Exactly, exactly. More people need to start using that theme for their videos.
I've been rocking the milk bar.
Milk Bar from Majora?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That just seems dope.
Majora is actually Majora's Mask is actually my favorite 3D Zelda.
I'll be excited to talk to you about that one. Let's stick on.
Well,
Link to the
you
Past.
you are
Oh, go ahead.
you are Majora T. You are Majora
Don't
T
tell anyone.
after all.
No. They're not supposed to know.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It doesn't matter.
Oh, sorry.
Let's do some comparisons. So I have the
Okay,
one main
okay.
comparison I want to do, and then if there are any other ones you want to bring up, I'm all ears. So the first one I want to do is Link to the Past versus all other top-down 2D Zeldas. Where does this rank amidst those?
Compared to the other ones, the only other top-down Zelda game I can think of that even like has a chance of dethroning A Link to the Past for me would be not I guess ironically or not would be A Link Between Worlds, which is basically like a pseudo sequel of sorts on the 3DS. I feel like that game kind of did the impossible and was able to like recreate the magic of A Link to the Past. And I, depending on what day you ask me, I might say that I prefer A Link Between Worlds, but like I still think I prefer A Link to the Past at the end of the day, but like A Link Between Worlds is like right there. I think
How does
yeah,
Link Between
it's
Worlds
fantastic.
give Link to the Past a run for its money?
It does give it a run for its money. It does. I think that the level design is really, really good. I think the graphics are great. I love the very cutesy like 3D visual style that they went with. The music's still great. I love how that game knows that there's a lot of people who are going into it that are already fans of A Link to the Past, and they play with your expectations. You are rewarded for like knowing that game. Like I know A Link to the Past very well, so there were like certain things that I found because I knew that game so well. So I'm like, oh, I know there's a secret here. I know that there's a secret there. I know if I go there and I talk to this person, this, that, or the other will happen. And sometimes they will just be like, yeah, you remember there's a heart piece here. There is a heart piece here. But sometimes they'll do something else. They'll be like, oh, instead there's an NPC here. And if you talk to them, it'll do something else. So I appreciate that, like, you're rewarded for knowing that game really well, but they didn't just take the lazy route for the most part. They didn't just go like, oh yeah, here's the same thing again. It was all like fun twists on what you remember. And I think that really elevated the experience. Now, despite that, I would still say that A Link Between Worlds, even if you've never touched A Link to the Past, stands on its own. Still a great game. You don't need to have played A Link to the Past. Still a really fun game with tight level design, you know, really, like I said, great visuals, great music. It's fun to play. At first, I was a little like unsure about the system where, because in A Link to the Past, if you want to get a new item, you know, if you want to find the hammer, if you want to find, um, you know, the boomerang or whatever, uh, you have to go into the dungeon. You have to find it. But this game has a system where um, you can either rent them in the shop, or if you have enough rupees, you could just buy it outright and you keep it. Which I thought was a bit of a strange system at first, but as I played through the game, it kind of it bothered me less. I was just like, you know, it's just how the game is. And at the same time, I think that they wanted to do something different, right? Like they didn't want to just copy A Link to the Past in every way, because then what would be the point? Just go back and play A Link to the Past. So I think they were just trying to come up with like a way to keep the game fresh and to give you like a different experience. And I think that makes sense. You know, like what's a way to do that? Well, let's give you more freedom, right? Like normally you get the hook shot in the Dark World, in like that the underwater temple, right? Well, now you could just get the hook shot, you know, much sooner than that if you felt like it. So it gives you a little more freedom in how you tackle the temples, and I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, great game. The only others like top-down Zelda that I could think of that is like in third place, it's probably either between Minish Cap or Link's Awakening. Both of them are really, really good. I haven't put as much time into Ages and Seasons as much as I would like, so I can't really comment much on those. I rented them both as a kid, but I didn't get a chance to finish them. But I really liked Minish Cap, and I really liked Link's Awakening. I'm not sure between the two which one I prefer though. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm sitting at. Like Link to the Past, Link Between Worlds, and then Link's Awakening and Minish Cap are kind of fighting it out.
Yeah, Link Between Worlds is surprising in that sense that it doesn't just feel kind of tacky, because you'd think it would with like, oh, you know, you have a Link on the wall gimmick or rent out the items. But I've only played it the one time. As you've been talking about, I've actually been questioning, did I finish this before Link Between Worlds before I finished Link to the Past? I don't know. I'll have to go back and replay it now. Yeah. But where do you think, and maybe the framing of this question's wrong, but I think you'll get what I'm asking. Like, where does Link Between Worlds fall short that Link to the Past kind of succeeds?
Okay. So it's kind of hard to say, but I kind of question myself on like, would I like A Link Between Worlds as much as I do if it wasn't for the fact that I played A Link to the Past as a kid, you know? Like, it's kind of hard for me to kind of like separate and go like, okay, because I still do stand by A Link Between Worlds being a great game on its own. You know, I stand by that, but for me personally, like, how much am I elevating that game based on how much I love A Link to the Past? So, and I guess that's kind of like the pitfall of making such a direct sequel in this way, because like it is a game that is like touching on your nostalgia. It is a game that is kind of banking on it almost. But again, I guess I don't really want to hold that against it, because like I still, like you said, it's not tacky. Like it's not done in a way that is I didn't feel like it was fan servicey. Like it just felt like you were just and more than anything, it just felt like you were rewarded for being familiar with it, and like there was just like cool little things here and there. You'd be like, oh man, that's from the original, or like, oh, that's a cool twist on it. I think the only thing about it that I guess I would say like A Link to the Past is like definitively better is I feel like a link, and that's not to say that Link to the Past is like a super hard game or that Link Between Worlds was too easy, but I do feel like for a Link to the Past, its challenge is definitely more engaging. And again, not to say I think a Link Between Worlds' difficulty is just right. Like it's, I never felt like the game was piss easy, and I never felt like the game was like making me bash my head against the wall or anything like that. But like again, just that A Link to the Past, the difficulty was just like a notch higher, and I think that just made uh particularly like the dark world dungeons made them just like a little bit more engaging just because like you really had to like think your way through them. Like there's like no way to like play the game absent-mindedly. Like you can't just zone out. You really need to like be focused and paying attention. And that's not to say you could do that in Link Between Worlds either. But I don't know. Like I said, I just think that Link Between A Link to the Past, the difficulty was a little bit higher. But I will say that I do think the puzzles in A Link Between Worlds are, some of them are a bit stronger. I think that A Link Between Worlds' puzzles were really good. There were times where I really had to stop and think. I'm like, how do I solve this? So I feel like A Link Between the Past's difficulty had to do more with like avoiding hazards, as opposed to A Link Between Worlds, where I feel like the difficulty of that came with like the puzzles being more brain teasers. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's just like different approaches to difficulty in that sense.
Yeah, and they've learned, every Zelda game since Link to the Past has learned a lot about dungeon design philosophy and how to implement puzzles in game. I had Spencer on to talk about this game, and he put it well that like the puzzles in the dungeons in Link to the Past are more exploration based than they are actual like blue switch, red switch, move thing on top of I don't know, like the rearrangement of certain items in the room. There is some of that in Link to the Past, but it's the origins of it. It's like the first time they're really doing this. So every Zelda game after that has the benefit of learning from what this game did. And, you know, Link's Awakening did puzzles really well as well. I happen to really like the puzzles, the way Capcom handled them in Oracle of Ages. In Minish Cap, it's cute. I like how they do the small Link, you know, concept, although I do think they could have done a little more with it. But yeah, with Link Between Worlds, yeah. I'm excited to kind of see how they hold up. But, you know, I mean, Link to the Past kind of hits home on like all fronts, you know, and you could make that same argument too. Like, you know, would I appreciate this game if I didn't play Link to the Past first for any 2D top-down Zelda? I think the difference, though, for Link Between Worlds is that it is the spin on Link to the Past. It is so direct. Yes. And so you can't separate the two. Yeah. You know, there definitely is a would Link Between Worlds exist if it wasn't for Link to the Past. Does that warrant it being automatically worse? No, not necessarily. And I think you do a good job of separating that. The fact that you can admit sometimes that you prefer Link Between Worlds and on its own merits, you know, for it being a competent standalone game. But I do know what you mean, sure. Too. I feel like in 3DS/Wii U era, they're probably trying to make it like as accessible as possible, and you're playing on a 3DS, so.
No, yeah, like I don't think they want people like throwing their 3DS on the subway when they're on their way to work.
Were there any other comparisons or contrasts that you think would be fitting for Link to the Past?
I think in a lot of ways, I feel like Ocarina of Time, in a loose sense, is like a 3D like remake of A Link to the Past, if you get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's 3 dungeons and Dark World, you know, basically, future, you know, and a lot of reused assets in terms of like music and I think even like items.
For sure. And I think that's why those 2 games in particular are the ones that like fans tend to like prop up as like their favorites or like the most important. It's because like they are so similar to each other, but like they represent like almost like two different eras, like I think the past the not even just eras, but like the two different like styles of Zelda, like the 2D top down and the 3D Zeldas. Like they both are like the blueprints that like most games from the series basically worked off of. Um, and yeah, and I also have to think like, if I played Ocarina first, would that have been like my favorite Zelda game as opposed to A Link to the Past? It's kind of hard to say because I still really like Ocarina of Time a lot. That being said, I do have to admit this, that when I replayed Ocarina of Time on the 3DS, I didn't have and I don't know if it's maybe just the 3DS version, but like I didn't have as good of a time with it compared to when I played it on the N64 as a kid. And I don't really know why. Like by the end of the game, I just felt kind of like done with it. And I was just like, let's just wrap this up. I'm done. As opposed to whenever I go back to A Link to the Past, I don't know, I just always have a consistently good time with it.
It's hard to say, and I'm the opposite end of the sword. I grew up with Ocarina of Time, and it is my favorite. So we have two not combating perspectives, just different perspectives.
No. Yeah, I don't know if maybe that was just the 3DS version. Because
if you ask me like which one I want to go back and replay today, it's console. Like I love my 3DS, but like it's not the right platform to experience the grandness of the adventure.
Not just that, but like even though sure, whatever, the 3DS version has better graphics, but there's something to be said about like kind of the grit of the N64's like polygonal like visuals. Like I think it adds something, and I feel like the kind of like very like rounded sort of like inoffensive look of the 3DS version, I think that kind of takes away from the atmosphere.
Yeah, I'm a polygon boy. Like I don't the watercolor look, it's cool. It does look really good, and I appreciate Grezzo for doing it.
Sure.
But I think I would make the same claim for Link to the Past. Part of that's charm is that like it's really one of the only top-down 2D Zelda games. The rest are on handheld. And it is such a grand, beautiful, visually impressive, stereoscopic experience that, I feel like you'd be disservicing yourself to play it handheld. Now, granted, I mean, I did play a little bit at Switch with my headphones on, and that was really cool too. But you really ought to experience it the best way possible.
Actually, I wanted to ask you, how did you feel about Grezzo's remake of Link's Awakening, if you played that?
Oh, was that a Grezzo remake? The Switch one?
I'm pretty sure.
So that's next. I'm going chronologically in terms of the releases. I have not played the Switch version because I didn't think it was worth it at the time. Basically, since it's just I don't know the right phrasing, but it is the map and the dungeons of the original game. So I kind of thought, why bother when it first came out? But now that I'm really going and really experiencing the full series, I want to know if I feel like it's a worthy contender. I do like the art style. I question if I will like it as much on the big screen because I know that there's some pop in with I don't know if that's the right word, but like with textures, like it's a little fuzzy. So,
So I beat the Switch version, and the only thing that really bothered me with that version was particularly out in like the world map, there was some slowdown at times, and eventually I got used to it, and I was just like, okay, whatever. The game's just like chugging a little bit, and then it will usually like correct itself. So I think that was like the only thing that bothered me. But then again, like I didn't grow up with Link's Awakening on the Game Boy. Like I never really played that version. So the Switch version was the only version of the game that I'm actually like familiar with.
Mm-hmm. So
personally, I really enjoyed it. I liked it a lot. I really like the graphics. I think the kind of like toy box aesthetic is really endearing, and um, kind of thinking back to because I was saying like, oh, it's between it and Minish Cap. I'm kind of thinking maybe Link's Awakening. I think I prefer it over Minish Cap. So it was a really good game. I really enjoyed it.
I'm looking forward to replaying it. I mean, that game is symbolic in wholly different ways. That's like the exploration of dreaming. So I think that's pretty cool. And I did grow up with the monochromatic original Game Boy version, and then I played DX years later, which added more colors. I liked it with less colors. Like
Interesting.
If you think of like, did you play the original Pokemons back in the day? And like how they were like sort of like they added some color to the Pokemon, even though the Game Boy was black and white. If you played it on a Game Boy Color, you'd be getting like some color output. That's kind of how I experienced it. I just really appreciated just like a green forest, or I'm trying to think what else, like the yellow sand. Like it's very simple, but they do so much with it. So I'm nostalgic for that.
No, I hear you. I definitely hear you because I had a Game Boy Pocket and I played Pokemon Blue and Yellow. And then eventually I got like a Game Boy Color. And I remember they would add like kind of like a blue or a red like filter of sorts on the screen, or they did something to give the game just like a little bit more color. And yeah, that there is something to that style. There is something to that, like just kind of very simple, just like just a few pixels on screen just to get across like this like Pokemon, this like you could probably count on like, two hands the amount of pixels that made up like Gengar or something like that.
Gotta appreciate it for what it was. You ready for the heavy hitter question? We got to talk about it. This game has been hailed as a masterpiece back in the day and today. So back in the day, Famicom in Japan, they gave this game nearly a perfect score. It was the highest rated game of its time at 39 out of 40 with 3 10 reviewers and 1 9. I want to know what that 9 reviewer said. And nowadays, I feel like the public perception is also more than favorable. Just before I really get into the question, would you agree with that?
I'm a little biased, but yeah, definitely.
I mean, do you agree that the public sees this game as like perfect and a masterpiece?
I don't believe in perfection, but I would say like based on personal experience that yeah, most people would consider this like one of, if not the best Zelda. At the very least, one of the best.
Okay.
I'm sure that like a lot of modern players that didn't grow up with A Link to the Past would say that like Breath of the Wild is the best one, or I know there's definitely a lot of people say Ocarina is the best one, but like at like the very least, I would say like most people who have played the game would say that it's a really good game or one of the best.
Okay, now where do you stand on that sentiment? Was it a masterpiece back in the day, and is it still today?
I think it is. I still think it's a masterpiece. It was a masterpiece then, it's a masterpiece now. I don't think it's aged. I think what made it great back then is still great today. I feel like some people might make the argument that like Zelda has had so many great entries since A Link to the Past that it might have invalidated it in some way, but I don't believe that for a second, because I feel like what makes even Ocarina of Time, which we agree is kind of like a loose remake of sorts, have very different appeals. The reasons to enjoy Ocarina of Time are not necessarily the same as A Link to the Past. And I would say that's true even for like the top-down Zeldas. Having beaten Link's Awakening not that long ago, I would say the appeal of Link's Awakening compared to A Link to the Past is very different. You know, they have different vibes. They have different goals. They're trying to do different things. So I feel like the stuff that made A Link to the Past special and unique for its time still holds true today.
Awesome. Okay. I have no further questions on that. I think I agree. I really enjoyed replaying it recently and playing it in order, like from release, because I did not have the full appreciation for it. I kind of questioned it a lot of times. I had played future 2D Zeldas before I played A Link to the Past, so I couldn't help but compare it. You know, I think as you're prone to do, and go like, oh, well, I like the dungeons better in these games, or some of these have really good music too. They all have great music, but I can really appreciate what this game does well, and so, masterpiece or not, you got to admit it's a great game.
I think, I think you'd be hard pressed to find some like A Link to the Past haters out there. Like, I'm not saying they don't exist, but like, it's such a charming, likable game. Like, there's really not a lot to like hate. It's fun. The music's great. It looks great. It's freaking Link to the Past, man. It's a classic.
Hell yeah. Okay, so let's talk about newcomers. Do you recommend this game to people who've never played it? And if so, what kind of player?
So I don't think there's anything wrong with like introducing this to someone who's never played Zelda before. It's pretty easy to get your hands on. If you have a Switch and you pay for the Switch Online, there you go, not a problem. I think 9 times out of 10, most people who own a Switch pay for the online. So for most Switch owners, and there's a lot of them, they already have access to the game, so that's already not a problem. I feel like the people that I would recommend this game to the most, was it Spencer the one who said it, or was it Alex that said that the puzzles in the game are more like exploration based?
Spencer, yeah.
Spencer said that? Okay. So to his point, I would recommend this game to people who value that sense of exploration, because I think this game does encourage exploration in a way that it feels very rewarding. If you go to the different like corners of the map, even if you may not necessarily have like the item that you need for that moment, it does something in your head where you're like, oh yeah, okay, there's a thing here. There's a black rock here. I need to come back here for some reason. And then you get the gloves and you're like, aha. So like there's just a joy in that sense of exploration of like going around the world, finding stuff. And even if you may not necessarily understand why, what you need in that situation, it will stick with you. And when you finally can like overcome that obstacle, it feels so good. So, and I think that's like that is like a core appeal for like a lot of people that place a lot of value in exploration of like just finding secrets, like and getting the tools to unlock more secrets. So yeah, I think A Link to the Past, unless this you're like a little kid and you can't stand 2D for whatever reason, like you just hate 2D games. Like at that point there's no talking to them. But like, someone who's a little more open-minded and is okay with playing an older game and doesn't mind the 2D visuals, I see no problem with recommending A Link to the Past as someone's first. And I think it also acts as like a really good starting point, because I feel like this is the first Zelda game that truly feels like a Zelda game. Because not to say like the previous 2 games aren't Zelda games, that's not what I mean. But like I feel like the blueprint for what the Zelda series is today started with A Link to the Past. Like it's um obviously it took elements from Zelda's 1 and 2, you know, and that stuff is important in A Link to the Past as well, but like the formula started here. And I feel like when you play A Link to the Past, you're going to see bits and pieces of A Link to the Past in every other Zelda game moving forward.
Yeah, and it's like quick. Like even if you're playing this
Yeah.
for the first time, like what are you spending like 10 hours maybe? And I do think it is so rewarding just like thinking while you're browsing the map. Like, oh, this guy, if he's sleeping, but if I pick up his sign, he gets pissed at me and then follows me. Like, what am I supposed to do with this guy?
Yeah.
It's like all little moments like that. Like there's so many moments here that, in your simple moving up and down the map are so meaningful. And I think you can really figure out a lot of it, on your own.
Yeah. I would agree. Like I was a little kid without the internet and I was able to beat the game. So I would say like anyone can play and finish this game.
There we go. If you have kids, when will you introduce this to them?
Maybe when they're 3, just like me.
There we go. Love it. All right, let's wrap up here. Final thoughts on The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past.
My final thoughts are that it's a game. It's a foundational game for me. It's a foundational game for the Zelda series, and I'd say it's a foundational game for gaming in general. It's a classic game for a reason. I would say even if you are someone that doesn't like the Zelda series, for whatever reason, I think you'll learn a lot about why gaming is the way it is today by playing A Link to the Past, because it came out like 3 decades ago, and I guarantee, like, if you are a fan of JRPGs, if you're a fan of like, or just like fantasy games, those games owe something to A Link to the Past. It was one of the first games that I can think of that was mainstream and had an emphasis on its story, because you can make the argument like, well, that would be Dragon Quest, and yeah, maybe in Japan, but I think in the West in particular, I can't think of any other like mainstream, like big mainstream game that that was really popular that put emphasis on the story. And I think for that reason, A Link to the Past kind of like opened the door for a lot of other games to experiment with their stories. And I think that's very significant. A Link to the Past is, it's the best kind of game, in my opinion. It's a great game that's also important that you could still go back to and have a great time with it. I love games that I played Half-Life for the first time not that long ago, like 2 or 3 years ago, and I think that game still holds up. I think Half-Life is still a great game, and it's an important game as well. So I love that. I love games that you can feel the impact that they had as you're playing them, but you could still enjoy them now. Like, because there are some games you go back to that are like, oof, this is rough going back to it. Like, I respect it for what it did, but I don't know how much more of this I can play. Not the case with A Link to the Past. Still a great game. You can still enjoy it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for coming on today, sharing your perspective. You have done it. You have set the record for longest interview. This has been a little bit of a challenge going, so well done. And to everybody at home, check him out here on the YouTube, Daniel Santos. He will have a Silent Hill 2 video essay coming out soon. Something to look forward to.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun. I haven't gushed about A Link to the Past like this, so it was great to like get this all out and relive a lot of like take a trip down memory lane and relive a bunch of old memories of like, oh yeah, that happened. Like,
yeah, I think sometimes we invalidate our like subjective experience, you know, to just try and be more objective. But I think it's important to lean into that. Like, let's relive the memories. Let's understand them for what they are and apply them accordingly.
For sure. For sure. I totally agree. Nothing wrong with taking a trip down that memory lane and, you know, getting in your feelings.
Well, let's channel our feelings. I don't have the best closer here, but I'd like you to give us your best Link impersonation. What would he say or emote on his way out of this interview?
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. That was perfect. Yeah, I thought you were the real deal. I thought you were actually Link for a sec.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, I heard his voice enough times over the years, so.
I can tell.